Unshelling Medicine Podcast. Healthcare in the language we understand.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of having Kathleen Reily with me. Kathleen Reily is the founder of Presensing Method for Peace. Catherine, thank you for being here. I'm so grateful you were able to make it. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. So we have a very hearty conversation today. So our conversation is going to be centering around your practice, right? So you're the founder of Presensing Method for Peace. And that is a mouthful, right? So if somebody...
Let's unpack it, no?
Let's unpack it all, one at a time. So Presensing Method for Peace, what does that entail? What is that? And how did you come into this?
Yes. So what it is, I'll first answer that and then how I got here. But Presensing is a meditation-based method that I developed about 8 years ago. And it is a 8-week process of rewiring the habit of stress, chronic stress in the nervous system. And really what it is essentially the nervous system is making up basically the operating system of the body. And the body is the subconscious mind. And in the subconscious mind is where all of those unconscious patterns exist, those habits exist. And namely, the one that we really focus on in this work, which is the habit of stress. And the language of the nervous system, the language of the body is emotion and feeling and sensing. And the language of the brain is thinking. And when it comes to healing and rewiring, right, we're using a lot of neuroplasticity in this process, this practice. And neuroplasticity just meaning, the brain's ability to build new circuitry in the brain to support new emotions and new thoughts, right? Emotions and thoughts, are always connected. So we are in this process. It's an 8-week process, and we're doing 3 applications of sitting down meditation each day. So it's intensive, but sometimes I'm working with clients who have been dealing with the habit of chronic stress for 20 years, 25 years. So it's not changing that, rewiring that habit doesn't happen in just a few days, or it needs to be an intense approach. So what you're doing is it's really threefold. First, you're disengaging with your physical environment. So you're closing your eyes, you're going within, and you're turning off what's called the default mode network in the brain, which is that portion of the brain that's responsible for predicting, worrying, dwelling on the future, dwelling on the past, what if, all of that, right? So you're turning that off to give the brain and nervous system a break. And then you're kind of moving into that space of 0 point. It's called many things, 0 point, quantum field, whatever you want to call it, but a set place of timelessness and, spacelessness. And in that space, you're then upregulating your emotional state. So once you've moved into that space of deep, deep stillness and silence where you're disengaged with the physical environment, you can then easily move into the subconscious mind and begin changing the patterns. And that's really the most effective way. A lot of people have, thought-based mantras that are not necessarily accompanied by emotion, or they're instructing the body to change using words alone, but without emotion, right? It's like, speaking the wrong language. And so then you are really tuning in the body and the heart and really activating the heart in a big way. You're tuning into elevated emotions. So you're moving into that greater state of love and peace and safety. And we know through really fascinating research from the last 20 to 30 years that the heart is deeply, deeply connected to the brain if you allow it to be so, right? And so the heart, what researchers have found is huge amounts of neural matter in the heart. So there are neurons in the heart that are identical to those in the brain. And they found that the heart actually communicates a lot more directly to the brain than the brain does to the heart. So, it becomes very important to, my definition of chronic anxiety is disconnection from the heart. And so when you can start changing and feeling the heart and elevating the heart into higher and higher emotions, that's when you start changing the vibration of the nervous system. And the nervous system can be thought of as a musical instrument that can be tuned on the basis of your emotions. And the more low-grade your emotions, i.e. the more fear-based, worry, anger, all the negative emotions activate stress hormones. So the more fear-based your emotions, the more disorderly your body is and the more out of tune the nervous system is. And then the inverse, right? The more elevated your emotional baseline is during the day, the more harmonized, the more equilibrium, homeostatic the nervous system is. It's at rest. It's in a good balance between the autonomic or the sympathetic, which is the and then the parasympathetic, which is the You want those balanced, So that's really kind of the essence of the work, and you're using the practice, but you're using the intentions. I now intend to receive a greater love. I now intend to receive greater peace. And there's indeed, a immaterial component here. Spiritual or connecting to a greater energy that is all loving and caring, and you're bringing that into the body, and you're changing your biology and your chemistry, because there's tons of fascinating research showing that your emotions are your chemistry.
Right.
And that's where you start getting into, the epigenetics of emotions. And so how I got here, that brief bit, I had shared with you a bit ago that from the age of 6 months till about 24, I had about a surgery every year. So I had a lot of trauma in my nervous system, a lot of stored up fear, and that started coming out in my early 20s with chronic anxiety and panic disorder. And I didn't want to go the pharmaceutical route. I knew this was a problem at a deeper inner level. It was an emotional problem. And so then I started delving into frequency-based, energy-based meditation. And that really transformed. I did that intensely every day for about 6 to 8 weeks, and really inadvertently completely healed those symptoms with some, mild bouts of anxiety or stress here and there, but having the tools to then bring myself back down. And then I delved into, learning a lot more and working with different medical doctors and practitioners on energy and meditation and neuroplasticity. And I found, when I started my company, I found a great gap in terms of providing emotional health tools to men. So my company is actually specifically targeted to work with men in the inner self-development space. And so, yeah, that's where Presence began, and that's my story 20 minutes later.
Oh, I love it. It's a lovely story. Why did you stop?
I was thirsty.
It's a lovely story. And, it's incredible that, your customer base are men, right? And for women to be in this space, it's refreshing to see that. And it's also very encouraging to know that, the men who come to you have the strength to be vulnerable enough to know that, hey, something is going on. I need the help, to be able to address, because it just doesn't feel right. Because, society, you said men are usually not given these tools, and there was a gap there and you noticed. And my belief is that society drives a lot of that, where men are expected to be stoic through things. Men are expected to not show emotions, right? Expected to tough through things. And in that builds this ego that sometimes is extremely detrimental, where help is not sought, is not accepted, and vulnerability is not present at all. Do you see there's any correlation between societal norm and, the men that you do work with?
Yes. It's interesting. There's a fascinating research study where a young boy, because, you can take a young boy who hasn't been conditioned not to feel, and maybe he's 4 or 5, but you can show him, the researcher shows the young boy a somewhat distressing image, maybe someone in a lot of pain, or someone, in a sad position, looking sad, feeling sad. And the young boy will respond, with a tremendous amount of empathy, and in the face, you'll see the facial expressions. And you take a conditioned young man who's been taught not to feel, that's weak, and you can, maybe 21 to 25, and that same research will show this very same distressing image. And what you can see in the facial muscles is you can see an instant reaction, but then of empathy, but then it's shut down, right? So there is that seed, there is that innate wisdom and knowing how to feel, how to connect to the energy of life, the feeling of life, which is emotion. But as you said, exactly, you're conditioned not to feel. And there's, what I find is, first of all, we see, the highest rates of suicide and substance abuse are among men. So I think really the root of the issue is it's the belief system that in order to be the best protector and provider, like you said, you must be stoic, you must be strong, you cannot feel, and you cannot discuss emotional issues, because if you do that, you'll be seen as inept in the realm of providing and protecting. And I would say that it's actually the flip, that long term, if we are seeing major dysregulation and high levels of inharmonious behavior at home, where there's a lot of anger and a lot of stress or disconnection, loneliness in a marriage is quite common. So, or you can even have, a lot of aggression or what have you in a home. If that's happening, then the core ingredient is missing, whereby, my realm of work is strictly with men. And I know there's tons of resources and support for women too. But what I see is when the young boy, when he begins to start experiencing pain or discomfort, uncomfortable emotions, he is not taught how to properly process the emotion. And emotion is just energy in motion. It's nothing to be afraid of, You just build the tools to process the energy. And this doesn't mean, running about the streets wailing and crying. This is about finding a quiet place in your home to sit down every day and clean your house, inside, clean up the house inside, and process the emotions, process the energy. And so basically, as that young boy becomes conditioned to suppress and push the discomfort deeper and deeper inside the cell bodies, really, of the physical body. I mean, it gets locked into the tissues of the body and the cells. So as dense, heavy emotion builds and builds and builds and builds, and then we start seeing disease, we start seeing emotional disorders of chronic stress, anxiety, depression, etc. And so in my experience, a lot of those things can be healed with, really dedicated energy practice, whereby you learn how to feel again, and you learn how to connect to that greater love, and start to heal those lower emotions. And they open, they move out of the body. And when you get to that place of just unbelievable freedom from that heaviness, from that burden, from whatever it was, it's just, it feels like you're living again. You're living, you're free, you're joyful, you're exuberant, you've connected to that small child within in many ways. But yeah, I hope that kind of helps. Yeah.
It did. And while we are very much on the topic of societal expectation, especially when it comes to men, and which is your primary clientele, have you experienced that men in position of power, leadership at home and in the workplace, who have gone through the process of healing their traumas and releasing the negative emotions, have shown improvement in how they manage at home and at work, and how they're able to tap into that innate empathy when dealing with a fellow human being?
Oh, yeah. And, taking that basic ability to connect fully, deeply, and in the present moment with another human being, that's all people want. It's that ability to connect. And going back to the earlier point about how I really believe that chronic anxiety is symptomatic of, disconnection from the heart. When through upregulating the emotional baseline of the nervous system, by doing that, you have to connect to your heart. You have to release, because a lot of guys, a lot of human beings, we close down the heart, And when we learn how to feel again, and we learn how to let go, as you said, and open up and let go of those traumas, those fears, all of that stuck heavy emotion, the heart begins to bloom and open. And that person, I see this all the time with clients, and we're actually starting to do this meditation work with politicians. And
Much needed.
Yes. So that we can start, imagine a world where connected to the heart. You're like,
much needed work. Good job.
Exactly.
Needed.
Oh my God.
That you're doing the light work. Thank you. Um,
Oh my
so
goodness.
especially with politics, there has been this sense of disconnection, and in a world where the incentive is a bigger salary, a payout or a line item, it's quite, I wouldn't say easy, it is easy, but it's quite attractive to lose that, close down the heart, that feeling, right? Because when you're empathetic, you don't get to think about your selfish need or your selfish endeavors. And I know you spoke about a 6 to 8 weeks, time span budgeted for, look at me talking about budgeting, plan.
Budgeting, the policy. Get a budget part time.
So there's about 6 to 8 week time frame a person should dedicate to going through this process, do you find, because again, we all heal differently, we all have our processes, do you find that sometimes the 8 weeks may not be enough for certain individuals because of maybe the inability to let go, or the trauma is just so ingrained that, more time is needed to like break through the crowd in a sense?
Yeah, yeah. We have had clients who take closer to 3 months. That is largely due to, two reasons. One, difficulty settling the body into the present moment and really, focusing on the instructions in the meditation to upregulate the nervous system. So there's that piece. Other times, like you said, if someone has not allowed themselves to feel for so long, asking them, like asking, someone who's maybe broken their leg or had cast on for there's a certain amount of time. It's going to take a little longer to open the heart. It's going to take a little longer to connect to those elevated emotions and really begin to heal. So there is, and we, some people do it in 6 weeks, some people do it in 3 months, but I'm very, very patient. We're going to there's always daily support and there's always hand holding. So we go through that process. And sometimes the third reason can be that it's an intensive regimen. And so it can take a few weeks sometimes for people to really get all 3 of those practices done every day and get into the habit of even doing it. So that does happen. But yeah. So when it comes to leadership, it's very important I have seen, to answer your question, yes, I have seen many clients in leadership positions begin to actually be able to connect to their colleagues on a very, a much deeper level. And that completely transforms the work environment. People are people, everything. And yeah, there are professions, politics being one of them, where, the incentives are there. The incentives are such that if you want to survive and do well, you are conditioned in that industry to shut down and disconnect from really the true values and morals of, strong human connection and empathy. And yeah, let's change that bit by bit.
Yeah, bit by bit is the only way we can change that, because we are complex beings and we've complicated things we're simple yet complex, but we've complicated things by absorbing negativity. Sometimes we can't help it. Life happened to some of us from a place where we couldn't make much of a choice, right? However, the healing process is one that we have recently started talking about a lot. These practices have always been there from the dawn of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
more and more, we're studying and seeing how the mind and the body is so connected that experiences sever that connection, or just, make it very rigid. That, things sometimes go out of sync, go out of whack. And it is great that the people that you work with, a majority men. And it's a good time to be alive, to be honest with you, where men are getting the support that they need, right? And they're given the tools to manage themselves, because being stoic, being closed off, being alone, and being in a silo may seem to work on the outside, but it usually doesn't interpret well in emotional well-being and, mental. So how do you work with somebody who has, say, who's diagnosed with a neurodivergent? Who is neurodivergent? I don't like to call it a diagnosis, because neurodivergent people are so incredible. Somebody who's neurodivergent, whether on the spectrum or ADHD, right? So how do you work with a person that their mind just thinks on a different level of speeds at a different level, right?
Yeah.
So how colorful is that process?
Yeah, well, no, that's a good point. We don't we don't work with everyone. We work with most people who come through the door, but if someone has severe depression, I won't bring them on as a client because, I'm not a therapist. I've developed this process. I have certifications in positive neuroplasticity and heart-brain coherence and other types of energy meditation. But I really want to feel fully confident that I can get each client the results that we're talking about in the beginning of the journey. Mm-hmm. And so I have had a handful of situations where, someone had really severe depression or very severe ADHD or, really had significant diagnoses of mental health challenge. And so I haven't worked with them. So, it's really more falling into that pattern of chronic stress. Everybody has trauma. So there's plenty of challenges that men are healing from their young adulthood, their childhood. But the very severe cases, I haven't taken on just because I don't have the right training. But in terms of neurodivergent, I have seen really good results. You just have to explain the emotional connection process differently. So if, for example, I'm thinking about a particular gentleman who, struggled a lot connecting to the more greater love, greater peace, the more kind of out there concepts of elevated emotion. And so then, what we did is we just simply walked him through different memories from his past, whereby he remembered feeling that kind of peace, or he remembered feeling that kind of connection to a childhood pet, which brought up the sensation, because you're just looking for sensation, feeling of that love, of that calm. And so yeah, there are different ways of connecting, but I've never had a client who, truly, beyond what I explained earlier in those different conditions, but who truly couldn't connect to any elevated emotions. All you need is that connection in order to start changing and upregulating the nervous system.
Okay, great. So about the program, right? It's about 68 weeks, and we're dealing with adults who work, who have a career, who have families, who have hobbies and everything in between, right? So yes, you did mention is intensive. What arrangements can be made for somebody to fit this healing journey into their busy lifestyle?
Yeah. Definitely there are things that have to go on the back burner, and we start with the draining activities, okay, let's put scrolling on hold for 8 weeks, healing chronic stress, scrolling.
No choices.
And you might find that this one is very interlinked with the other.
Yep.
So we do put things on hold, and there is, communication with the family. Hey, listen, for 8 weeks, I'm going to be doing this course. I'm going to be getting up an extra 30 minutes early, going to bed an extra 30 minutes late, and I'll be doing this practice in the morning in this room. The door's closed. It's locked. I've got my headphones on. I'm not available from 6 to 6:30 a.m. And usually they're very supportive of this because, we want Papa to be happy and calm and present and enjoying life more and laughing more. So there are definitely things that have to be, or sometimes I'll have clients who are extremely active physically and so they might have to temper that by, 20%. Yeah. But it's temporary. And then, once you start experiencing the benefits, which you really start seeing the noticeable shifts after about 3 weeks, then it's like, oh, yeah, this is my priority. And then, yeah.
So about Papa being happy, that's all well and good, right?
Papa being happy.
Papa, right? We absolutely want a very happy Papa. However, doesn't Papa's environment also have to heal? Because we all have our luggage, right? Mama has her luggage and Papa had his. In both of these people having their luggage, they either intentionally or unintentionally have programmed the children to think along those lines. So when you're working with a family man, right? Is there resources, or are there resources that you also provide to the family? Because it's kind of like going and taking a shower, right? And washing, shampoo, conditioner, face wash, body wash, loofah all the way down, and, dry off and jump right into mud.
Mm.
Right. So
Yeah.
is there, or are they tools that the family can either use to support themselves and Papa, or do you have a colleague that you can refer Mama to work with, and also the children?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, no one's ever asked me that question. Great question. I do. There's a wonderful woman who I refer to the wives, because when they start seeing their husbands transform, they're like, oh, what are you doing here? How can I do this? So I really firmly believe 100% that a person's outer environment, their relationships, their family, their home, their work, their circumstances, their reality, really doesn't change until they change inwardly. Because as you know, right, when you open your eyes, what you see and experience, that's the mirror of your internal world. And with regard, sometimes I'll actually, inevitably, usually clients will share this information and these tools with their wives, but no matter what happens, everything starts with them changing. And I just, so often people are immobilized with their growth, or their growth is stunted because they're looking at other people. She needs to change, or he needs to change, or it's their fault. And so it's just like this immobilizing. And as long as you are waiting on someone else to change, nothing's gonna, you might see some mild improvements, but people are always, unless someone's really doing it for themselves on the inside, they're really making that concerted effort to shift and transform, then the old habits are going to relapse. And, it's not uncommon for a father who might have some unhealthy emotional habits, like severe anger or outbursts, or when he starts to see his children imitating his behavior, that's the moment when he really realizes, okay, I want to change this, because I'm molding my children, and I'm molding, this environment. And so that will often be, an activating factor for change as well.
Right. Right. So let's talk about environment, for instance. That a lot of people that in their healing journey are either going no contact or limiting contact with people that are triggering, right? And granted, the work is an inside work. However, the environment also could have an effect on stunting your growth or falling off that wagon during your healing journey. Healing is not pretty. Healing, we make it sound cute. It's not pretty.
Just go to like a beautiful, clean resort in Indonesia.
No, it's not. Think of hiking a volcano, active.
Or like mining deep down in the earth. It's like, oh,
that's the healing process for you. It's not a cute one. However, it is necessary. Going back to environment, people, and whereas the personal people who, despite how much of a healing process somebody goes through, there are just certain things that are either done by a person, said by a person, that triggers, right? So do you also support your client to identify their triggers, right? And to either disassociate that from that trigger, however they want to, whether long term or whether while they're going through their healing journey, to get themselves in a place that feels controlled, where they have the tools to be able to control those emotions before, gradually introducing themselves back, or not at all? Because it's kind of like desensitizing in a sense. Do you have clients in those situations? And, I'd like to know how you handle it.
Yeah. So to best answer that question, this 8-week cycle, right? The first 4 weeks, you're entirely focused on what I call building the resources. So you are entirely focused on exposing the nervous system to the elevated frequencies of love, peace, calm, safety, and over and over and over again, right? This is neuroplasticity, where it's, God, Kathleen, I'm so over and over again. I know,
Yeah.
God, I already know what you're going to say. I know, just 4 weeks of it, and then you get new meditations. So that's the first month. The second month is literally about doing what you just asked. So the second month is about taking those learned frequencies, synthesizing them into one new elevated emotion, i.e., a new baseline of happiness. So if you have a new baseline of happiness that's comprised of the felt sense of love, peace, right, protection, safety, if that's your new baseline, which you've cultivated in the nervous system, and you've done it so many times that it's innate, you can access it very quickly, then I sit down with them and I say, okay, all right, what are the most common situations? We have 4 weeks now. So week 1, what is the biggest loop that activates your stress response? Oh, okay, it's that particular maybe colleague or something. Okay, all right, so let's break this down. What happens? Okay, here's the situation. I get an email, or, whatever it is, the stimulus is the particular email. Okay, what's the reaction? The reaction is stress. Okay, where do you feel that in your body? I feel it a tightening in my chest and shoulders. My breath starts to get shallow. Okay, so then they use a particular tool, which I teach them, and that tool it basically distracts the amygdala, so it interrupts the sounding bell of the stress response and allows them to calm the nervous system back down and make a different emotional choice. So it's a huge awareness journey. You're waking up to what was once unconscious and now becoming aware of. And then in doing that, it's like, I don't know, training something to go in one direction over and over again, or, you're rerouting all the time. You're like, no, reroute to peace and calm, reroute to peace and calm. And then, you do this enough times, the brain builds new circuitry where it is now autopilot. You already know, and then, you get the email and you just feel relaxed.
Yeah. It's about building new neural pathways. The way somebody put it so beautifully, I'll never forget it. It's like, when you go hiking, the trails that were made from, if you're in the United States, by the Native Americans and wild animals, those trails are still there, however overgrown, but those trails are still there. However, the new trails that we've made in modern day, hiking, biking, whatever, through the trails, are the trails that are more visible. The old pathways are not eliminated. They're not just used. You recognize that, hey, maybe this goes off a cliff, and that's a cliff I don't want to go off of. I'm trying to stay on this side. So, it just, as we proceed to the end of our conversation, have you encountered a client who really wants to make a change? However, it is difficult for them to go through that rough healing process. Because it doesn't feel good. Somebody's a bit resistant.
Yeah. I mean, but that's where the support comes in. That's where the coaching comes in. So someone might say, once they've really committed to the journey, I've had a handful of people actually say, whoa, I thought I could, put other things on the back burner, but I can't do this, and okay, right, that's fine. And then, we'll make other arrangements. But for the most part, when they're in. And it's kind of a self-selecting process, right? the people who gravitate to my, practices, my YouTube videos, my content, they really resonate with the message of self-development, self-agency, taking care of your own, cleaning your own house, if you really want to see change in your life, and really dedicating yourself to becoming a better man, a better husband, a better, whatever it is, a better version of yourself. And so they really do resonate, and they're often, very disciplined in their own way already. So that's pretty infrequent. But no doubt there's always a rough period. There's always a rough period. Yeah.
I bet. I absolutely do not doubt that at all. Healing is not pretty. So,
The end result, I promise, it's amazing.
The end result is beautiful. The end result, even when you start seeing small changes, it's beautiful. But it's a journey everybody should embark on. Your frequency is your frequency, or your span of getting to the end of that journey is yours. However, if you have support, utilize your support. But it is a journey that, as a people, we absolutely do need it. So as we wrap up, for the men who are listening to us, Kathleen, right, what would you like to tell them about healing and finding help, and knowing that it is strength as opposed to weakness to want to heal those injuries?
Yeah, well, you really just you basically said it. What I wanted to share, the last thing I wanted to share is it's really time to consider a greater, more evolved version of strength. There's that. The human being has an animal side, and the human being has a more, evolved, divine, greater side. And there's a much greater definition of strength as a man. And that is, where your outer circumstances are not ruling your inner environment, where you are truly mastering your emotions, and mastering your reactions, and mastering your inner environment. And you're not subject to the whims of, changing tides, changing winds of what's happening outside of you. So that's an even greater level and an even greater definition of being strong. And so that's definitely what I would share.
So you heard it here, gentlemen. So what we are going to do is that everything Kathleen related will be in the show notes. Everywhere you can contact her, reach her social media channels, how to work with her. Please do reach out. Make your inquiries. Knowledge is power. Learn something, improve yourself. The general community will benefit. Your family will benefit. We love you. We support you. Heal, please. Thank you. So,
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What a great conversation.
This was great. This was great. And I really do have, people that have supported my growth, both personally and career, and wonderful, beautiful men. I do know that a lot of people have traumas that they stuff, and sometimes it comes out in ways you least expect it. And seeking help is not popular. However, it is needed. Please take the help that you need, and enjoy. You will love it. You'll love yourself for it. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for being here, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm grateful. So we'll make sure everything is, in the show notes. Please listen, comment, get engaged. Let us know what you think. Please don't be shy. Talk to us. Let us know if this was useful. I know it was useful for the people that actually were looking forward to this episode. I know it will be useful to them. So let us also know what you think. All right? Thank you, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Unshelling Medicine Podcast. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Altruistic Scribe on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We share additional tips, updates, and health-related content that you won't want to miss. Have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes? Reach out to us at altruisticscribeco.com. We're always eager to hear from our listeners and tackle the health topics that matter most to you. Until next time, stay healthy and take care.